probably heard by
now. If you haven't, I'll tell you about the prank call to Scott Walker from a leftist journalist, an obscure, wacko, extreme leftist publication. A journalist pretended to be David Koch. Now, I know David Koch. A little disclosure here, I know David Koch. I know his brother Charles Koch. The so-called evil Koch brothers are nothing of the sort. They are, as is typical, the exact opposite of the way the Democrats and the media portray them. They're just like any other people. They have organizations that are designed to influence and shape the country in ways they believe in. They happen to be constitutionalists. They happen to be conservatives. They happen to have a strict moral code, and they're very concerned about what's happening in the country, and they have organizations that defend and protect their beliefs as they relate to the founding of the country, pure and simple. They come from the Koch petrochemical and oil family from Wichita, Kansas. Charles Koch still lives there. David Koch lives in New York. David Koch is the man who bought Jacqueline Onassis's apartment on Fifth Avenue after she died, and it was put up for sale. He has since sold it and moved to another place in town. But I've met them at charitable events. I've met them at prostate cancer charitable events. I've met them at a number of charitable events. And they are, as is typical of people who are not in line with the American left, they are maligned in ways that in no way close approach who these two men are and their families. Now, you've probably heard by now that this prank call from a journalist at a fringe extremist leftist little rag newspaper pretended to be David Koch, who is referred to as a fat cat conservative donor. So this guy calls the governor's office in Wisconsin, claims to be David Koch. That name rings bells in the governor's office amongst the underlings. He puts the call through, assuming it's David Koch. So the governor ends up talking to David Koch, and now the AP has this story. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker. Is it the AP? I want to make sure it's the AP. Yahoo News. Yeah, it's AP. In fact, it's the top story of AP now. Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker has been lured into a conversation about his strategy to cripple public employee unions by a prank caller pretending to be a billionaire Republican donor. Walker's spokesman Colin Werwey confirms the governor is on audio of the call posted Wednesday on the website of the Buffalo Beast, of left-leaning New York newspaper. The governor believes the caller is David Koch. He talks about plans for layoff notices and what can be done to punish lawmakers who've left the state. The caller suggests that Walker take a baseball bat when meeting with Democrats. Walker jokes that he's got a slugger with his name on it. Now, the brothers, David and Charles Koch, have given millions to support Americans for Prosperity, which has launched a $320,000 ad campaign supporting Governor Walker. I have spoken at Charles Koch's event in Vail a 3 years ago. I forget which. And I met people there that I had previously met at other groups and organizations. This is the creme de la creme of conservative philanthropy. There's hardly any subversives at all. Now, the funny thing is, if you listen to the tape, and it's been made available, it's a long tape. We don't have it yet, and if we get it, well, we will. It's going to take a long time to pare this down to the essentials, but if you listen to it, if you read a transcript of the phone call, Walker says in private to this prank caller exactly what he says in public, even to a possible fat cat donor. He doesn't say anything he hasn't said publicly. He was not entrapped into saying something. Yeah, what I'm really doing here, David, you would love me. You know, what I'm really doing here. That's none of that. He was just being upfront. I guess that's shocking to the left and the Democrats and their media minions, is that there's not something surreptitious going on here. It is just it's a typical, this is a journalist. Well, if you're going to talk about the ethics of posing as somebody else, then you're going to have to indict 60 Minutes. I mean, that's how 60 Minutes put themselves on the map. Well, I mean, 60 Minutes are going to some gas station, ripping people off. You know, had a Jesus on the cash register, and they put a hidden microphone in and send in fake customers to rip them off. I mean, this is a common journalistic ploy. No, the real question here is, why wasn't this properly vetted in the governor's office? How did this call? I mean, anybody can make a prank call. You can't sit here and condemn what happened because prank call. Hell, I should do this on the radio, for crying out loud. I never call governors and stuff, but I mean, I did this kind of stuff as bits, comedy bits, back in the early days of radio, when you could do this without having to get permission of the person you were talking to put them on the radio or tape record them. Oh, gosh, I did all, when I pretended to have a picture phone, the fun I had doing that, the phone calls I made with my non-existent picture phone, when I was in the video phone, when I was in Pittsburgh. No, that's not the question. You can't, I mean, you can say, yeah, okay, typical journalist, false, misrepresentation, attempt to entrap, and so forth. The thing is, the guy failed. What they're trying to get Scott Walker, he dared talk to a Republican donor. Meanwhile, you got Obama meeting with Richard Trumka 3 times a week, for crying out loud. I'm going to tell you something, folks. A vision of America. David and Charles Koch versus Richard Trumka. Trumka doesn't even rate a consideration, in my mind, in terms of a vision for America. So you can sit here and talk about this all you want. Try to make hay out of the fact that he took a call from David Koch. If David Koch called me, I'd take the call. If Charles Koch called me, I'd take it. If Bill Koch called me, I'd take the call. Hell, if Freddie Koch called me, Freddie Koch, their brother, lives over there, and if Freddie Koch called me, I'd take the call. There's nothing wrong with the Kochs. They're great people. For crying out loud, I'd much rather spend time with them than Richard Trumka. I'd much rather go to a conference about what's wrong with America with those guys than I would with Richard Trumka, who's meeting with Obama. For crying out loud, we've got some people trying to subvert capitalism. We've got an administration that is leveling an assault on free markets in this country each and every day, and now we're all out of whack because the governor of Wisconsin, well, nobody's out of whack, but the left is acting like some moral transgression of the highest order is taking place here because Governor Walker talked to David Koch. Big whoop. Be no different than if, let's see, take a donor. Doesn't matter, pick a name. George Soros, for crying out loud, calls all these leftists and they take a call for you. think there'd be an accompanying story rooted in controversy over it? I mean, I think it's a sign of just, they've got nothing to hold on. They got nothing of substance on their side to promote their case. This is typical of the left, trying to discredit and impugn the people who oppose them. Don't argue with them on the merits. Don't, by any stretch, in fact, go so far as to leave the state and then fake a call, pretend to be somebody you're not, hoping that the governor steps in a pile of it. We've heard so much more about the Koch brothers in the mainstream media than we've ever heard about George Soros. And compare how little they do compared to Soros. They don't, I mean, the Koch brothers, I don't think they've, well, I know they, who funded Media Matters? Who funds Americans for whatever? George Soros is at the root of all of the problematic Democrat liberal things in this country. So anyway, that's if you haven't heard about it, you have now, and that's the hay that they're going to try to make out of all this. The other news item that happened in the previous hour that just now being commented on out there, ladies and gentlemen, the Defense of Marriage Act, the regime, Obama has told Eric Holder to stop defending the Defense of Marriage Act. Obama's decided that it's unconstitutional. So is Eric Holder. He's asked the Justice Department to stop defending it in court. The person briefed on the decision said, yeah, the president believes that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. They are no longer going to be defending the cases in the First and Second Circuits. The administration will formally notify Congress later today. The story I have here from the National Journal says the act sought to restrict single-sex unions. That is a pathetic explanation here of what the Defense of Marriage Act, correct me if I'm wrong, and the Defense of Marriage Act goes back to the Clinton era. Clinton signed it. The Defense of Marriage Act allows states to not recognize same-sex marriage if they choose not to. Pure and simple. An act of Congress, duly passed and signed into law by the president, allows states to not recognize same-sex marriage if they don't want to. Well, what's going on here? Well, one of the things that's happening here is that the union situation for the Democrats is in trouble. And make no mistake, this is not coincidental here. There are no coincidences in politics. The union as a money laundering operation, public sector unions as money laundering operations for the Democrat Party is now under assault. In Wisconsin, in Indiana, coming in Ohio, in New Jersey, it's going to be happening because the states don't have any money. And now people are learning that the collective bargaining of public sector unions is simply stealing from the taxpayers of that state. There's no corporate interest here that's taking advantage of anybody. This is simply public sector unions stealing from taxpayers under the guise of collective bargaining. So they're looking at this and say, we might lose this. We might have the flow of money from taxpayers who don't want to contribute to us, who end up donating to us via union salaries. Here's how this works, to put this all in perspective, just so you understand. Start at the very beginning. You, Mr. Taxpayer, go out and you earn your salary. Pick a number. You earn $50,000 a year. You pay taxes on that. Your tax revenue goes to the federal government, goes to the state, goes to the city, wherever. The amount of money goes to the state, is then used for a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is paying people who are members of unions that work for your state. So your tax dollars are the sole source of income for state union employees. Your neighbors, they just happen to work for the state. They're a union member, so your tax dollars are the sole source of their income. And you've now learned that their annual income and benefits package is twice what you, who are not in a union, make. And you are paying them. But after you pay them, it doesn't stop there. After you pay via your taxes the salaries and benefits of all these unionized workers in your state, they are paying dues to the union. Those dues end up as campaign donations to Democrats. So even if you are a Republican non-union member in a state, your tax dollars are going to the campaign coffers of the Democrat Party in your state, in Washington, and perhaps the Obama regime as well, via union dues, which are also being paid for by you. Well, people are starting to realize what this is now. It's a money laundering operation. How many of you who are not union in the state of Wisconsin and who are Republican are learning for the first time that your state income taxes, a portion of it, is ending up in ad campaigns and other spending for Democrat candidates in your state and nationally? Obama and his bunch are figuring out now that people are going to start learning this. They're going to start figuring out the money laundering aspect of what's going on here. And they're thinking, well, maybe this, maybe we might lose this collective bargaining business. They might lose this source of revenue or a portion of it. So where do they make it up? Hello, gay people. Hello, gay marriage advocates. Hello, you are our new best friends. And guess what? We know that you hate the Defense of Marriage Act. We know that you don't like it, and we're going to agree. We're going to find the whole thing is unconstitutional. You want to get married, and there are states out there that won't recognize it. Well, we're going to say they can't. We're not going to defend it anymore. Send us some money. That's what this is. In part or in toto. This is about either replacing what they think might be some lost union money down the road or just adding to it. But here's the thing, folks. Irrespective of your view of the Defense of Marriage Act, it is the duty of the executive branch, the Justice Department, to defend in court the laws the U.S. Congress has passed. They can't do what they've done. Obama can't declare it unconstitutional and stop defending it. He can't do that without the Supreme Court arriving. Determining the constitutionality of a statute is not the job of the president. It's not the job of the attorney general. They can't do legally what they're doing here. They cannot do it. These are the new left outlaws.